German transport officer vanished in 1945. 80 years later, his Alpine storage vault was found. September 17, 2023. The Austrian Alps near the village of Altacy, Salzkammergut region. A geological survey team from the University of Vienna drills into the limestone face of the Sandling Massif, testing structural integrity for a planned mountain railway expansion. At precisely 11:47 a.m., the diamond-tipped bore breaks through into empty space. The drill bit drops 6 centimeters before meeting resistance again. Lead geologist Dr. Martin Hochsteiger pulls back the equipment and peers into the narrow opening with a fiber-optic camera. What appears on the monitor shouldn't exist. A chamber, roughly 4 meters wide, 6 meters deep, carved into the mountain itself. But this is no natural cave formation. The walls show tool marks, precise, deliberate excavation. And there, in the LED glow of the camera light, metal storage containers line the back wall. Gray steel boxes, approximately 60 centimeters square, stacked in 3 rows, 12 containers total. Each one bears the same marking stenciled in black paint. A Wehrmacht eagle above the alphanumeric code, TK Führungsstab Süd 847. Transport Command Leadership Staff South, Container 847. Dr. Hochsteiger contacts the Austrian Federal Monuments Office within the hour. By 4:30 p.m., a team from the Documentation Center of Austrian Resistance arrives on site. By nightfall, the narrow drill hole has been carefully widened into an access shaft. 3 researchers enter the chamber wearing respirators and protective suits, their headlamps cutting through 8 decades of undisturbed darkness. The air inside tests negative for biological hazards, but carries the distinctive metallic scent of old paper and oxidized steel. The temperature reads a constant 8.3 degrees Celsius, perfect preservation conditions. When Dr. Elizabeth Waldner of the Documentation Center opens the first container, her hands shake despite 20 years of experience with wartime discoveries. Inside, Wehrmacht identification papers. Soldbücher, the standard German military paybooks issued to every soldier. But these documents show something impossible. The first booklet belongs to Oberstleutnant Klaus Heinrich Edler von Reichenbach, born April 3, 1907 in Dresden. Officer in the Transport Corps, Heeresgruppe Süd, Army Group South. His photograph shows a lean face with pale eyes and a thin mouth, a man in his late 30s, wearing the collar insignia of a lieutenant colonel. According to official military records maintained by the Deutsche Dienststelle, German Armed Forces Information Office, in Berlin, Klaus von Reichenbach died on April 29, 1945, during the final defense of Munich. Killed in action. Body never recovered amid the chaos of collapse. His name appears on memorial rolls. His family received official notification of death in September 1945. His Iron Cross First Class and other decorations were sent to his last known address, a ruined apartment building in Berchtesgaden that had been bombed 3 times. Dr. Waldner opens the second container. Inside, more documentation. Travel permits dated May 1945, after von Reichenbach's supposed death. Identity papers under different names: Kurt Halser, Heinrich Brenner, Klaus Hoffmann. Each set of documents includes photographs of the same man from the Wehrmacht ID, aged progressively, wearing civilian clothes. Swiss entry visas. Italian railway tickets. A Spanish residence permit dated 1947 under the name Claudio Richenbach. The third container holds something even more damning: a leather-bound journal handwritten in precise German script. The first entry reads, München 15. April 1945, Der Plan muss jetzt beginnen. Munich, April 15, 1945, the plan must begin now. The fourth container, gold. 47 small bars, each approximately 100 grams, stamped with Third Reich Eagle and swastika marks. Enough wealth to fund a comfortable existence for years, perhaps decades. Reichsbank serial numbers still legible. The 5th through 8th containers, detailed maps, not military operational maps but escape routes. Red ink traces a path from Munich through the Alps into Austria, then Switzerland, Italy, Spain. Waypoint coordinates marked in code. Safe house addresses. Contact names, some crossed out, others circled. An entire network preserved in cartographic detail. The ninth container. Photographs. A dark-haired woman holding two children, a boy and a girl, ages perhaps 8 and 10. Written on the back in faded pencil, Margaret Hans Geisler, Dresden, Weihnacht 1943. Christmas 1943. The last year von Reichenbach's family lived before Allied bombing consumed Dresden in February 1945. The 10th container. Letters. Dozens of them written but never sent. Letters to Mein Liebste Margaret, My Dearest Margaret, dated from 1945 through 1968. Letters describing a life lived under false names. Letters expressing guilt, justification, loneliness, determination. Letters explaining why he chose survival when death would have been easier. Letters a dead man supposedly wrote for 23 years after his official death. Dr. Waldner photographs everything before touching anything further. The Documentation Center immediately contacts German authorities, Holocaust memorial organizations, and international war crimes researchers. By September 20th, forensic teams from 3 countries converge on this remote Alpine location. The official story says Klaus von Reichenbach died defending the Third Reich in its final days. The evidence hidden in this mountain vault tells a radically different story. The official story says he was buried in the rubble of Munich. The evidence suggests he walked away from the inferno, crossed international borders with forged papers, and lived freely for decades while the world believed him dead. This is the story of how a German transport officer orchestrated one of the most meticulously planned disappearances of the post-war period. This is the story of how a man erased himself from history. This is the story the Austrian Alps kept secret for 78 years. If you want to see what investigators found in those remaining containers, what the forensic analysis revealed, and where Klaus von Reichenbach actually spent his final years, hit the like button and subscribe, because this historical mystery goes deeper than anyone imagined. Klaus Heinrich Edler von Reichenbach entered the world on April 3, 1907, in Dresden, Kingdom of Saxony, during the final years of the German Empire. The Edler designation, meaning noble, indicated minor aristocratic lineage, a family that had served in Prussian administrative positions for 3 generations, but possessed no great wealth or land holdings. His father, Friedrich von Reichenbach, worked as a railway logistics coordinator for the Saxon State Railways. His mother, Anna Elisabeth née Hartmann, came from a middle-class merchant family in Leipzig. Young Klaus grew up in a household that valued precision, organization, and systematic thinking. His father's work involved coordinating complex train schedules, cargo allocations, and supply chain logistics across hundreds of kilometers of rail network. These dinner table conversations about tonnage calculations, route efficiency, and coordination problems shaped Klaus's fundamental approach to problem solving. By age 12, he could calculate train arrival times accounting for cargo weight and terrain gradients faster than some professional schedulers. He attended the Kreisschule in Dresden, one of Germany's oldest educational institutions, from 1913 to 1925. School records describe him as exceptionally capable in mathematics and geography, but socially reserved. He excelled at chess, winning the regional student championship in 1923. His headmaster's final evaluation noted, "Klaus possesses an unusual ability to see multiple steps ahead and plan accordingly. He approaches problems not emotionally, but systematically, seeking the most efficient solution regardless of conventional thinking." The family weathered the First World War without direct military service. Friedrich's railway expertise exempted him from frontline duty, but the post-war chaos of the Weimar Republic destabilized their comfortable middle-class existence. Hyperinflation in 1923 obliterated their savings. Klaus watched his mother weep over worthless banknotes that couldn't buy bread. This experience crystallized his worldview. Institutions could fail, currencies could collapse, but practical skills and careful planning could ensure survival. In 1925, at age 18, Klaus enrolled at the Technical University of Dresden, studying civil engineering with a focus on transportation infrastructure. He graduated in 1929 with high honors, his thesis examining optimization of multimodal freight networks in Alpine regions, a prescient topic that would later define his wartime career. He worked briefly for the Reichsbahn, German state railway, in Stuttgart, then returned to Dresden in 1932 to work under his now-aging father. December 1932, Klaus married Margarethe Schiller, daughter of a Dresden textile manufacturer. She was 23, he was 25. Contemporary accounts describe her as spirited and artistic, a contrast to Klaus's methodical nature. Their son Hans was born in November 1933, daughter Gisela in March 1935. Photographs from this period show Klaus in civilian clothes, holding his infant son with awkward stiffness, a man more comfortable with timetables than tenderness. The rise of the Nazi Party complicated Klaus's apolitical stance. When Hitler consolidated power in 1933, civil service positions increasingly required NSDAP membership. Klaus joined the party in 1934. NSDAP membership number 3,847,562, not out of ideological fervor but pragmatic necessity. He needed to keep working. He had a family to support. His personnel file contains no record of political activism, no zealous speeches, no volunteer work for party organizations. He attended mandatory meetings and paid his dues, nothing more. September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Klaus von Reichenbach received military conscription papers on September 8. Age 32, married with 2 children, possessing critical technical expertise. He was assigned not to combat units but to the Transport Corps, specifically the Railway Engineering Division. His rank, lieutenant. His assignment, ensuring military supplies moved efficiently from German industrial centers to forward operational areas. Klaus's war was fought not with rifles but with railway schedules, cargo manifests, and bridge capacity calculations. As German forces swept across Poland, then France, then into the Soviet Union, the Transport Corps became the invisible backbone of military success. Every tank required fuel. Every artillery battery needed shells. Every division demanded food, medical supplies, spare parts, ammunition. Moving this material across thousands of kilometers of railway, much of it damaged by combat or built to different gauge standards, required extraordinary organizational ability. By 1941, Klaus had risen to Hauptmann captain, commanding a railway repair battalion attached to Army Group South. His unit's responsibility, keeping supply lines open across Ukraine as German forces drove toward Stalingrad and the Caucasus oil fields. His personnel evaluations praise his exceptional talent for improvisation under chaotic conditions, an ability to maintain supply flow despite partisan attacks and infrastructure damage. Wehrmacht documents reveal Klaus developed innovative solutions to persistent logistical problems. When standard railway bridges couldn't support heavy German locomotives, he designed temporary reinforcement systems using local materials. When partisan sabotage destroyed track sections, he created mobile repair teams that could restore service within hours instead of days. When Soviet rail gauge differences slowed supply transfer, he organized efficient transshipment facilities at gauge change points. By 1943, Klaus held the rank of major and commanded transport operations for the entire southern sector of the Eastern Front. His headquarters shifted frequently: Kiev, Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, always just behind the front lines, coordinating the intricate dance of supply and demand. His staff numbered over 200: railway engineers, schedulers, security personnel, repair crews. He controlled the movement of thousands of tons of material daily. But 1943 also brought catastrophic change to Klaus's personal world. February 13, 1945, British and American bombers struck Dresden in a series of massive raids. The resulting firestorm consumed the city center. Over 25,000 people died. Among them, Klaus's parents, killed when their apartment building collapsed. Among them, Margaret von Reichenbach and both children, Hans, age 11, and Gisela, age 9, trapped in a shelter that became a crematorium. Klaus was in Kharkiv when he received notification. A telegram dated February 18th, preserved in his military file: family residence destroyed, all inhabitants presumed deceased, confirmation pending. No bodies were recovered. In the chaos of Dresden's destruction, thousands simply vanished into ash and rubble. Something changed in Klaus von Reichenbach after Dresden. Colleagues noticed it. His efficiency remained, but a coldness entered his demeanor. Major Ernst Clausen, his deputy, later testified. After the telegram, the Herr Major became distant. He worked constantly, slept little, spoke only about operational matters. He never mentioned his family again. It was as if he had sealed that part of himself away. By late 1943, even the most deluded Nazi officials recognized Germany was losing the war. The Eastern Front had reversed after Stalingrad. The Western Allies controlled North Africa and Italy. Strategic bombing devastated German cities. Yet the war ground on, consuming men and material in a futile defense. Klaus von Reichenbach understood logistics. He could read supply charts and troop movements the way others read novels. By early 1944, he knew mathematically, objectively, that Germany would lose. The numbers didn't lie. The Wehrmacht consumed resources faster than German industry could produce them. Every month, the gap widened. Defeat was not a possibility, but an arithmetic certainty. January 1944, Klaus received promotion to Oberstleutnant Lieutenant Colonel and reassignment to Transport Command Leadership Staff South, based in Munich. This posting moved him from field operations to strategic planning, coordinating supply movements across southern Germany, Austria, and northern Italy. The work involved constant interaction with SS logistics offices, including oversight of transport supporting concentration camps and forced labor programs. Here the historical record becomes morally complicated. Klaus's command signature appears on transport schedules that included freight movements to Dachau, Mauthausen, and subcamps throughout the Alpine region. These transports carried not just military supplies but also prisoners, slave laborers, and concentration camp victims. How much Klaus knew, whether he understood the full horror of these destinations or viewed them as simply another logistical requirement, remains contested. What is certain, Klaus possessed detailed knowledge of the railway network throughout the Alpine region. He knew every tunnel, every bridge, every switching station. He knew which routes could handle heavy loads and which were vulnerable to air attack. He knew the location of supply depots, fuel reserves, and equipment storage. He knew the entire infrastructure of German control in the region, and he knew this knowledge would be valuable when the collapse came. By autumn 1944, Klaus began making preparations. Quietly, methodically, while officially coordinating the defense of Bavaria and Austria, he simultaneously orchestrated his own survival plan. He diverted small quantities of gold from transport shipments, never enough to trigger audits, but accumulating steadily. He collected identity documents from deceased soldiers with similar physical characteristics. He established contact with civilians in neutral Switzerland. He studied escape routes used by others fleeing justice. Klaus von Reichenbach was not a Nazi ideologue. He was not driven by racial hatred or political fanaticism. He was a railway logistics expert who joined the party to keep his job, who served in the military because he was conscripted, who lost everything in Dresden's flames. But he was also a man whose organizational genius kept supplies flowing to genocidal operations. a man who saw Germany's defeat approaching and prioritized not justice or surrender, but escape. The war had taken his family. He decided it would not take his life. April 15, 1945, 06:30 hours, Transport Command Headquarters, Munich. American forces had crossed the Rhine in March. Soviet troops encircled Berlin. Munich itself would fall within weeks. The Third Reich existed now only on maps that no longer reflected reality. Yet Klaus von Reichenbach sat in his office on Ludwigstrasse, reviewing not defense plans but his personal calendar. The plan, der Plan, as he called it in his journal, required perfect timing. Too early, and military police would hunt deserters. Too late, and the Allied occupation would seal borders and begin systematic documentation of all German military personnel. The window of opportunity would open during the collapse itself, in those chaotic final days when command structure dissolved and everyone scrambled to save themselves. His journal entry from that morning: the Wehrmacht still functions barely, orders still flow downward, but the edges fray, units dissolve, officers vanish. In 2 weeks, perhaps 3, chaos becomes absolute. That is when der Plan proceeds. Klaus had spent 6 months assembling the necessary components. Hidden in his office safe, 4 complete sets of forged identity papers. The first identified him as Major Kurt Halser, Wehrmacht Transport Corps, authorized for special assignment courier duty, a role that justified independent travel. The second set, Heinrich Brenner, civilian railway engineer from Stuttgart, age 42, exempted from military service due to essential war work. The third, Klaus Hoffmann, Swiss national, resident of Zurich, holding pre-war German residence permits now expired. The fourth set remained blank, to be filled in as circumstances required. Each identity had been meticulously constructed. Kurt Halser's papers included authentic Wehrmacht stamps. Klaus had access to the real articles. Heinrich Brenner's civilian documents featured carefully aged paper and period-appropriate typewriter fonts. The Swiss passport for Klaus Hoffmann was genuine, stolen from a deceased aid worker whose body had passed through Munich's military morgue in January. Klaus had the corpse registered under a false name, preserving the valuable identity intact. The gold presented more complicated logistics. Over 8 months, Klaus had systematically diverted small quantities from transport shipments passing through Munich. Not enough to trigger investigations. A few bars here and there, each theft attributed to partisan raids or documentation errors. He'd accumulated 47 bars totaling approximately 4.7 kilograms, worth perhaps 15,000 Reichsmarks in official terms, but exponentially more valuable on black markets, where hard currency was collapsing. The gold now sat in a locked storage container at the Berchtesgaden Railway Depot, registered under false documentation as spare locomotive parts and marked for storage pending maintenance. No one had checked. No one would. The depot superintendent, a railway veteran named Schmidt who'd served under Klaus's father in 1918, asked no questions when Klaus personally delivered the container on March 22nd. April 20th, 1945, 14:00 hours, Hitler's birthday, the last one he would see. Klaus attended mandatory ceremonies at Munich headquarters, speeches praising the Führer's genius, while Soviet shells fell on Berlin 300 kilometers away. The cognitive dissonance had become grotesque. Officers who spoke confidently of final victory kept packed suitcases hidden in their offices. That evening, Klaus received orders to coordinate supply shipments to Alpine positions south of Munich, the so-called Alpenfestung, or Alpine Fortress, where fanatics imagined making a last stand in mountain strongholds. The orders were militarily meaningless. There would be no Alpine Fortress, but the assignment gave Klaus exactly what he needed: authorization to travel throughout the Alpine region, inspecting rail facilities and supply depots. He departed Munich on April 22nd at 08:00 hours, driving a military staff car with Feldwebel Sergeant Otto Kessler as driver. Kessler was 46, a career soldier who'd served in the First World War and knew when to keep his mouth shut. Klaus had chosen him carefully. When they stopped for fuel outside Bad Turles, Klaus handed Kessler an envelope containing 2,000 Reichsmarks and Swiss transit papers. "After you drop me in Berchtesgaden," Klaus said quietly, "you'll drive northwest toward the American lines. You'll surrender within 48 hours. You'll tell them I was killed when partisans ambushed us near Traunstein. You'll provide them this map showing where the ambush occurred. Understood?" Kessler looked at the money, then at Klaus. "Understood, Herr Oberstleutnant. If questioned about me in the future, you remember only that I died on April 24, 1945. Partisan attack. Body burned in the vehicle. Nothing more." "Nothing more, Herr Oberstleutnant." They reached Berchtesgaden at 16:30 hours. Klaus dismissed Kessler at the railway depot. The sergeant drove away without looking back, and Klaus never saw him again. But Kessler kept his word. American military records from May 1, 1945, document his surrender and his testimony about the death of Lieutenant Colonel Klaus von Reichenbach, killed in partisan ambush near Traunstein on April 24. April 24, 1945, the day Klaus officially died. In reality, Klaus spent that day at the Berchtesgaden depot, working alone in the storage building. He retrieved the container of gold, transferred it to a large hiking rucksack along with his forged documents, maps, food supplies, and civilian clothing. Total weight, approximately 22 kilograms, manageable for a fit man hiking Alpine trails. At 19:00 hours, he changed into civilian hiking clothes, quality mountaineering gear he'd purchased in 1943 under a false name. He left his Wehrmacht uniform, his decorations, his officer's pistol, and his wedding ring in the storage building, placed carefully in a wooden box with a note. Property of K.H. von Reichenbach, deceased April 24, 1945. He locked the building and walked away. The first safe house lay 14 kilometers south, near the village of Ramsau. Klaus knew the owner, a former railway worker named Johann Mitterer, who'd retired to a mountain farmhouse in 1938. Klaus had done Mitterer a favor in 1942, ensuring his son received non-combat assignment after a training injury. Mitterer owed him. Klaus hiked through darkness, following trails he'd scouted months earlier. He reached the farmhouse at 23:45 hours. Mitterer asked no questions, offered bread and soup, provided a bed in the barn. Klaus slept 4 hours. April 25, 1945, 05:00 hours. Klaus continued south on foot. The Alps rose around him, peaks still white with late spring snow. He crossed into Austria at 09:30 using a forest trail that bypassed border posts. Not that borders meant much anymore. The Reich was dissolving. No one-man checkpoints. The entire structure of control was evaporating. At 16:00 hours, he reached the second waypoint, Altacy, the same region where his storage vault would be discovered 78 years later. But in April 1945, Altacy was a hive of Nazi activity. The salt mines there held looted art from across Europe, thousands of paintings, sculptures, cultural treasures stolen from museums and Jewish families. SS guards still patrolled the area, protecting the regime's final plunder. Klaus avoided the mines themselves, instead following a trail east to a remote mountain lodge operated by Friedrich Brenner, no relation to his false identity Heinrich Brenner. Friedrich ran a small hunting lodge that catered to wealthy tourists before the war. Now it sat empty, isolated, forgotten. But not by Klaus. He'd arranged payment in advance, gold bars delivered by trusted courier in March. Friedrich asked no questions when Klaus arrived. He provided a room, hot food, and something more valuable, information. 3 others have passed through this month, Friedrich told him over schnapps that evening. 2 SS officers from Linz heading for Italy. 1 Gestapo man from Vienna planning to reach Spain. There are networks, Herr, whatever your name is. people who help men like you disappear. How do I contact them? Klaus asked. Friedrich slid a folded paper across the table. This address in Innsbruck, a lawyer named Haupt. He arranges things, documents, safe passage, connections in Switzerland and beyond. He'll want payment, substantial payment. Klaus looked at the paper. What's his price? For you, a Wehrmacht officer with no blood directly on his hands. Probably 3 or 4 gold bars. For SS men, much more. Friedrich paused. He's selective. He won't help death camp guards or wanted war criminals. Too risky, but a transport officer who kept trains running that he can work with. Klaus spent 3 days at the hunting lodge, waiting for American forces to advance further north, creating more chaos, more distraction. During those days, he made a crucial decision about the vault. April 27, 1945. Klaus hired 2 local miners, men who worked the Altacy salt mines and knew how to carve storage chambers in rock. He told them he needed a secure storage space for valuable documents, things he couldn't carry but might retrieve later. He paid them 1 gold bar each, an enormous sum for 2 days' work. They selected a location on the Sandling Massif, accessible but not obvious. Using mining tools, they carved the chamber in 40 hours of hard labor. Klaus lined the walls with boards salvaged from the hunting lodge, creating a dry storage space protected from moisture. He installed the steel containers, purchased from a Wehrmacht depot before leaving Munich, officially registered as lost in partisan raid. Into those containers, Klaus packed everything he couldn't carry. His Wehrmacht documents, proof of identity if ever needed. Additional forged papers for future contingencies. Maps showing the complete escape network, valuable information. Photographs of his family, sentiment he couldn't quite abandon. And 20 bars of gold, insurance policy if the immediate escape failed. Most importantly, he packed the journal. He'd started writing it in April, documenting his plan, his reasoning, his motivations. He wrote it as justification, as explanation, as proof that he was not running from guilt, but from a collapsing world where his survival meant nothing to anyone but himself. The final entry before sealing the vault. If these words are found, know that Klaus von Reichenbach chose life. Not honor, not duty, life. After Dresden took everything, I owed the Reich nothing. I owed myself survival. April 29, 1945. The same day official records list his death in Munich. Klaus stood at the chamber entrance with the 2 miners. They'd installed a stone facing that matched the surrounding rock, leaving only a narrow air channel disguised as a natural crack. Unless someone knew exactly where to look, the vault was invisible. "What's in there?" one miner asked, curious despite himself. "The past," Klaus said, "and possibly the future." He paid them the 2nd gold bar each, then made a calculation. These men knew too much. They could tell authorities about the German officer who paid them gold to build a secret chamber. They could reveal his location, his appearance, his plans. Klaus's hand moved to the Walther PPK pistol concealed in his jacket. Yes, he'd kept 1 weapon after all. His finger touched the grip. 2 shots. Problem solved. Perfect operational security. But he didn't draw the weapon. Perhaps because he wasn't a murderer, not yet, not directly. Perhaps because some line still existed he wouldn't cross. Perhaps because the miners were just men trying to survive like him. They'd given him no reason to believe they'd talk. He lowered his hand. "Go home," he told them. "Forget you saw me. The war is over. Everyone has secrets now." The miners left. Klaus never learned if they kept silent or if their testimony simply disappeared into the chaos of 1945. Either way, they vanished from his story. Klaus departed Altacy on April 30th, carrying his reduced pack, now just 15 kilograms with less gold. He hiked southeast toward the Austrian-Swiss border, following routes he'd memorized from intelligence maps. The journey would take 4 days of mountain travel, avoiding roads, staying clear of American forces advancing from the north and west. May 1, 1945, Hitler dead in Berlin, the Reich's death throes. May 2, 1945, Klaus reached the Swiss border near Feldkirch, Austria. The border fence was unmanned. Swiss guards stationed 2 kilometers away, covering official crossing points. Klaus waited for nightfall, then simply walked across through a forest gap. At 03:00 hours on May 3, 1945, Klaus von Reichenbach entered Switzerland carrying false papers identifying him as Heinrich Brenner, German railway engineer fleeing the American advance. Switzerland, officially neutral but effectively Allied sympathetic, interned many German refugees in camps, but Klaus wasn't heading for internment. He had an address in Innsbruck, actually just across the border in Austria but accessible through Swiss territory. A lawyer named Haupt, a man who could erase the past and create new futures for the right price. Klaus had enough gold left to pay that price, and he had something more valuable, time. While the world believed him dead, he could disappear completely. The plan, their plan, had succeeded. September 18, 2023, Documentation Center of Austrian Resistance, Vienna. Dr. Elizabeth Waldner places the leather journal under specialized photography equipment, capturing each page in high-resolution detail before physical handling risks further deterioration. The journal contains 187 pages of handwritten text, dated from April 15, 1945, through March 22, 1968. 23 years of entries from a supposedly dead man. The handwriting analysis begins immediately. Dr. Petra Schwarzenberg, document examiner from the Austrian National Archives, compares the journal entries against verified samples of Klaus von Reichenbach's handwriting. Personnel reports he signed in 1944, letters to his wife from 1943, military supply requisitions bearing his signature. She examines letter formation, pen pressure patterns, unconscious quirks in how he formed certain characters. The consistency is remarkable, Dr. Schwarzenberg reports on September 21st. The writer developed slight arthritis in the right hand around 1962. You can see the letters becoming more angular, the pressure lighter. But the fundamental patterns remain constant across all samples. The probability that these are the same hand exceeds 99.2%. Next, the paper itself. Forensic testing reveals the journal pages date from multiple sources. The first 70 pages, covering 1945 through 1952, show wartime German paper manufacture, consistent with supplies available in the Alpine region in spring 1945. Pages 71 through 134, 1952-1962, reveal Spanish paper production, specifically from mills near Barcelona. The final 53 pages, 1962-1968, show Argentine manufacture. The geographic progression tells a story: Germany to Spain to Argentina, a trail across continents documented in paper chemistry. September 25, 2023, the research team expands. Dr. Heinrich Vogel from the Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich arrives in Altacy, specializing in Wehrmacht personnel records. He's been cross-referencing Klaus von Reichenbach's official file against the documents found in the vault. The contradictions multiply. Official record: Klaus died April 29, 1945, in Munich during American artillery bombardment. Evidence: testimony from Feldwebel Otto Kessler, who reported partisan ambush near Traunstein on April 24th. But Kessler's sworn statement to American forces, located in U.S. National Archives, shows problematic details. Kessler described an ambush at 14:00 hours on April 24th, Dr. Vogel notes. He claimed partisans fired from a tree line near kilometer marker 47 on the Munich-Salzburg road. But here's the problem: American forces seized that section of road on April 23rd. Wehrmacht traffic couldn't have been there on April 24th. the timeline doesn't work. More curious, Kessler's subsequent life. American records show he was released from POW status in June 1946, returned to his hometown of Rosenheim, and worked as a truck driver until his death in 1978. But Swiss banking records, declassified in 2021 under new transparency protocols, reveal something interesting. In May 1945, someone deposited 2,000 Swiss francs into an account under Kessler's name at a bank in Zurich. The equivalent of about $450 US dollars in 1945, roughly 6 months' wages for a skilled worker. Someone paid Kessler well for something, perhaps for testimony about a partisan ambush that never happened. October 3, 2023, DNA analysis begins. Several items from the vault contain biological material potentially useful for genetic identification. A hairbrush found in container 9 holds multiple hair samples with intact follicles, dried saliva on envelope seals from the letters, skin cells on leather gloves packed in container 3. Dr. Claudia Reisinger, forensic geneticist from the University of Innsbruck, extracts DNA from 6 samples. The genetic profile emerges. Male, haplogroup R1bu16, common in northern Germany. No markers indicating Jewish ancestry, relevant for understanding why Klaus wasn't targeted by racial laws. Various health markers indicating predisposition for cardiovascular disease and mild color blindness. But DNA alone can't confirm identity without comparative samples. Dr. Reisinger needs genetic material from Klaus von Reichenbach's verified relatives. The search begins for living descendants. This proves remarkably difficult. Klaus's wife Margaret and both children died in Dresden. Klaus's parents died in the same bombing. His only sibling, a younger brother named Friedrich, was killed at Stalingrad in 1942. The family line appears extinct. But Dr. Vogel, researching parish records in Dresden, finds something. Klaus's mother Anna Elisabeth had a sister, Gertrude Hartmann, who married a baker in Leipzig and had 4 children. If any of those children or their descendants survived, they would share mitochondrial DNA with Klaus's mother, and by extension, Klaus himself. October 17, 2023, breakthrough. Gertrude Hartmann's granddaughter, Erika Schneider, now 78 years old, lives in Hamburg. Contacted by researchers, she agrees to provide a DNA sample. Her mitochondrial DNA matches the samples from the vault within acceptable ranges for second-cousin relationship. Klaus von Reichenbach's biological identity is confirmed. The man who left DNA in that vault was definitely the Wehrmacht officer declared dead in 1945. But the deeper mystery remains. What happened after he sealed the vault? Where did he go? How long did he survive? Where is he now? The journal provides clues, but Klaus wrote carefully. He never recorded exact addresses, always using coded references. The lawyer in Eichstätt instead of lawyer hopped in Innsbruck. The contact in B-City instead of specific names in Barcelona. He knew the journal, if discovered, could endanger people who'd helped him. November 2, 2023, the research team reconstructs the escape network. Dr. Anna Felber, historian specializing in post-war rat lines, escape routes for Nazi fugitives, begins mapping the network Klaus used. She compares the coded references in his journal against known escape routes documented by Allied intelligence. The pattern emerges. Klaus followed what historians call the Alpine route, a network of safe houses, forged document suppliers, and sympathetic contacts stretching from southern Germany through Austria and Switzerland, then into Italy and Spain. This route was used by hundreds of escaping Germans between 1945 and 1950, including several wanted war criminals. But Klaus's route shows sophisticated differences. He avoided the main rat line hubs, places like Murano, Italy, where Franciscan monks helped fugitives, or Genoa, where corrupt officials issued false documents. Those hubs were known to Allied intelligence. Many users were eventually tracked and arrested. Instead, Klaus used parallel routes, smaller towns, less obvious contacts. His journal from May 1945 mentions the lawyer who provided Swiss transit papers. Cross-referencing against Swiss wartime records, Dr. Felber identifies a likely candidate, Dr. Werner Haupt, lawyer in Innsbruck who maintained offices in Zurich and had documented connections to helping Germans enter Switzerland. Haupt's files, preserved in Austrian archives, contain no mention of Klaus von Reichenbach or any of his aliases. Either Haupt kept no records of such activities, or those records were destroyed. But Haupt's bank records, subpoenaed during a 1949 investigation into smuggling, show unusual gold transactions in May 1945, deposits converted to Swiss francs, then withdrawn as cash in small amounts over several months. The gold from Klaus's vault transformed into untraceable currency. November 15, 2023, the Spanish connection. Klaus's journal entries from 1947 through 1962 reference life in the southern city, with work at the harbor. The paper analysis indicated Spanish manufacture. Researchers focus on Spain, particularly Barcelona, a known destination for German refugees where Franco's fascist government asked few questions about newcomers' pasts. Dr. Miguel Sanchez, researcher at the University of Barcelona, examined Spanish immigration records from 1946-1950. He finds 37 German men who entered Spain with potentially false documentation during that period. One entry stands out: Claudio Reichenbach, Ingeniero Ferroviario, Alemán Nacionalizado Suizo. Claudio Reichenbach, railway engineer, German naturalized as Swiss citizen. Entry date: September 14, 1947. Entry point: Port Bou on the French-Spanish border. Stated destination: Barcelona. Occupation: civil engineering consultant. Age: 40, matching Klaus's actual age within 1 year. Physical description: 178 cm tall, brown hair, pale eyes, thin build. The height matches Klaus's military records exactly. Claudio Reichenbach. Klaus Reichenbach with a Spanish first name and slightly altered surname. Not particularly creative, but effective. Spain received thousands of German refugees. Officials didn't scrutinize every name. Dr. Sanchez searches Barcelona city records for Claudio Reichenbach. He finds a residence registration from October 1947, apartment at Cara de la Marina, 247, in the Pobal Nou district near the harbor. This address appears in Barcelona records continuously until January 1963, when the registration changes to domicilio trasladado, residence transferred. For 15 years, Klaus lived in Barcelona under false identity. What did he do there? How did he support himself? Who knew his real identity? November 28, 2023, Barcelona Municipal Employment Archives. Dr. Sanchez finds employment records for Claudio Reichenbach. From October 1947 through December 1962, Reichenbach worked as a technical consultant for Ferrocarrils de Catalunya, the Catalonian railway company. His specialty: logistics optimization and freight routing. His personnel file includes performance evaluations describing him as exceptionally competent and reserved but professional. He used his real skills under a false name. The Wehrmacht transport expert became a Spanish railway consultant. No one questioned his expertise. No one investigated his past. He collected his salary, paid his taxes, lived quietly in a third-floor apartment in a working-class neighborhood. But the journal reveals his interior life. Entry from April 15, 1952, exactly 7 years after he initiated their plan. 7 years free, 7 years alive. But what is this freedom? I work, I eat, I sleep. I speak to colleagues about train schedules and freight allocations. I live alone. I tell no one who I really am. I am Klaus von Reichenbach pretending to be Claudio Reichenbach pretending to be a normal man. Sometimes I forget which is the performance and which is real. I dream of Dresden, not the burning, I never saw the burning. I dream of Christmas 1943, the last one with Margaret and the children, Gisela asking when I would come home from the war. Hans showing me his school marks, so proud. I told them I would return in spring. I lied. I never returned. The war took them and I kept living. Is that survival, or is that the cruelest punishment, to live when everyone you loved is ash? The letters to Margaret fill 8 envelopes in container 10. Letters written between 1945 and 1968, though Margaret died in 1945. Letters never sent, never mailed, simply written and sealed and stored in the vault. Klaus returned to Altacy periodically, adding documents to the containers. The entries suggest he visited in 1952, 1958, and 1963. Dr. Waldner reads these letters, these confessions written to a dead woman. Letter dated June 1948. My dearest Margaret, I sit in a cafe in Barcelona watching families with children. The father orders ice cream, the children laugh, the mother smiles. I remember when we did that in Dresden before the war. Hans with chocolate ice cream on his nose, Gisela spinning until she was dizzy, you laughing at their foolishness. I would give everything, the gold, the freedom, everything for one more hour of that, but I cannot. So I sit and I watch, and I write letters to a ghost. Letter dated December 1956. I saw a woman today who looked like you from behind. Same dark hair, same way of walking. My heart stopped. I followed her for 3 blocks before I realized my madness. She was perhaps 25, Spanish, nothing like you except my desperate imagination. I am haunted not by guilt but by loss. I regret nothing I did to survive, but I regret every moment I cannot spend with you. Letter dated February 1963. I am 55 now, old, my joints ache. I have lived 18 years longer than you. 18 years you should have lived. Hans would be 29 now, Gisela 27. I would be a grandfather perhaps, but there is nothing. I am the last von Reichenbach, alone in a foreign country carrying a name not my own. When I die, who will mourn Klaus? No one. Claudio Reichenbach will be buried by colleagues who never knew him. And Klaus von Reichenbach will remain dead, as he has been since 1945. December 10, 2023, the Argentine Trail. Klaus's journal entries end in 1968, but the paper analysis showed Argentine manufacture for the final pages. Dr. Felber traces emigration records from Spain to Argentina. In January 1963, Claudio Reichenbach appears on passenger manifest for the ship Cabo San Vicente, departing Barcelona for Buenos Aires. Argentina in the 1960s remained a haven for former Nazis. Adolf Eichmann had been captured there in 1960, revealing the extent of German refugee populations in South America. The Peron government had welcomed Nazis openly in the late 1940s. Even after Peron's fall, Argentina asked few questions about European immigrants. Klaus was 76 when he left Spain, retirement age, but why relocate to Argentina at that age? The journal's final entries provide hints. Entry from November 1962. The investigators come, the trials begin. In Germany, they prosecute Wehrmacht officers now, not just SS, not just concentration camp guards, anyone who helped the machine function. I read about General Major Wagner convicted for transport of prisoners. His role was like mine. They sentenced him to 7 years. I'm not safe anymore. Even Spain may cooperate with German prosecutors. I must move further away. The Frankfurt Auschwitz trials began in 1963, prosecuting individuals who'd participated in Holocaust operations. The German government was actively pursuing Wehrmacht personnel involved in war crimes. Klaus's transport responsibilities, moving supplies to concentration camps, could theoretically make him prosecutable. Even after 18 years of freedom, the past threatened his survival. December 20, 2023, Buenos Aires Archives. Argentine researcher Dr. Tomás Ruiz searches immigration records. Claudio Reichenbach entered Argentina on February 8, 1963, declaring his profession as ingeniero, engineer. He listed his age accurately as 55 and his nationality as Swiss, maintaining the Swiss identity documentation from his earlier forged papers. But tracking his life in Argentina proves difficult. The trail grows cold. No continuous residence records. No employment documentation. Reichenbach's name appears only intermittently. A bank account opened in 1963, small cash withdrawals monthly, then nothing after 1968. Did Klaus die in 1968? The final journal entry is dated March 22, 1968, written in a shaky hand showing clear evidence of the arthritis Dr. Schwarzenberg identified. I am 60 years old. I have outlived my wife by 23 years. I have outlived my children by 23 years. I have outlived the Reich by 23 years. I have outlived Klaus von Reichenbach by 23 years. This journal ends here. I will not return to the vault. I will not add more letters or documents. Let this be the record. Klaus chose survival. He escaped justice, escaped punishment, escaped accountability. He lived free and alone and filled with ghosts. Let history judge if that was success or its own eternal sentence. No further evidence of Klaus von Reichenbach or any of his aliases appears in historical records after 1968. Either he died that year, or he vanished even more completely, perhaps using yet another identity. The investigative team can trace his escape from Germany to Switzerland, his life in Spain, his relocation to Argentina, but they cannot determine his ultimate fate. January 8, 2024, final forensic report released. The Documentation Center of Austrian Resistance publishes its comprehensive findings. The evidence proves conclusively that Klaus von Reichenbach faked his death, escaped through the Alps using forged documents and gold stolen from military supplies, lived under false identity in Spain for 15 years, then relocated to Argentina, where he disappeared from historical record after 1968. He likely died of natural causes somewhere in South America, buried under a false name, mourned by no one who knew his true identity. The last member of his family line, extinct by his own survival. The report notes, Klaus von Reichenbach represents the thousands of Wehrmacht personnel who escaped justice after 1945, not through dramatic rat lines or organized networks, but through careful planning, forged documentation, and exploitation of post-war chaos. His case demonstrates that many escapes succeeded not because of elaborate conspiracies, but because individuals with organizational skills and resources could simply disappear when the Reich collapsed. But questions remain. How many others used the same route? Who else did lawyer Haupt help disappear? What happened to the remaining gold from Klaus's thefts? Did he help others escape? The vault keeps some secrets still. Container 11 and 12, briefly mentioned in the discovery report, contain documents that researchers haven't fully disclosed. What's in them? More names, more escape routes, evidence of wider networks. The full truth may never emerge, but Klaus von Reichenbach's story, from Wehrmacht logistics officer to Spanish railway consultant to Argentine ghost, is now documented, preserved, undeniable. A man who officially died in 1945 actually lived at least until 1968, perhaps longer. A man who lost everything in Dresden preserved his own life at any cost. A man who served a genocidal regime escaped consequences by being better at logistics than those who hunted him. January 22, 2024. Dr. Anna Felber publishes supplementary research reconstructing the complete escape network Klaus von Reichenbach utilized. The network wasn't a single organized conspiracy, but rather an interconnected web of opportunistic individuals, corrupt officials, sympathetic civilians, and practical businessmen who profited from helping Germans disappear. Klaus navigated this web with the same systematic skill he applied to railway logistics. Klaus's preparations began not in April but months earlier. His journal contains cryptic references to acquiring resources, starting in January 1945. Cross-referencing Wehrmacht supply records shows systematic discrepancies in gold shipments passing through Munich during this period. Between January 15 and April 10, 1945, approximately 8.2 kilograms of gold, 82 100-gram bars, went missing from 11 different transport shipments Klaus's command processed. Each theft was small enough to be attributed to partisan raids, Allied bombing disruptions, or documentation errors. No investigation was launched. In a collapsing Reich, 8.2 kilograms of missing gold barely registered. Klaus stored this gold in multiple locations. 20 bars at the Berchtesgaden depot, later moved to the Altacy vault. 47 bars distributed across 3 other locations, and 15 bars converted to Swiss francs through a currency dealer in Munich named Leopold Gantz. Gantz operated a jewelry shop on Maximilianstrasse that served as front for black market currency exchange. Wehrmacht officers with access to valuables came to Gantz to convert gold, silver, and jewelry into more portable currencies, Swiss francs, US dollars, even Swedish krona. Gantz charged 30% commission but asked no questions. Munich police records from 1946 show Gantz was arrested by American military government and charged with black market activities. During interrogation, he admitted facilitating currency exchange for dozens of Wehrmacht officers between 1944 and 1945, including several high-ranking transport command personnel. He never provided names. American authorities sentenced him to 18 months imprisonment, then released him in 1947. He emigrated to Uruguay in 1948 and died there in 1961. Through Gantz, Klaus converted 15 gold bars into approximately 4,800 Swiss francs, about $1,100 US dollars in 1945 purchasing power, enough to live modestly for a year if necessary. Klaus kept this currency in a money belt worn constantly under his uniform starting in March 1945. Forged documents required specialized expertise. Klaus couldn't create convincing papers himself. He needed professionals. He found them through Lieutenant Max Steiner, a Wehrmacht administrative officer stationed in Munich who ran a side business producing false documents. Steiner's operation came to light in 2008 when his daughter donated his wartime papers to the Munich Municipal Archives. Among them, carbon copies of dozens of false identity documents created between 1944-1945, including Wehrmacht travel permits, civilian identity cards, and border crossing papers. One carbon copy matches exactly the Kurt Halser documents found in Klaus's vault. Same photograph, same stamps, same typewriter font. The carbon is dated March 3, 1945. Steiner's price list, preserved in the same archive, shows complete Wehrmacht officer identity set with travel authorization, 500 RM or 2 gold bars. Klaus paid in gold. Steiner produced 4 complete identity sets for him over 2 months. Steiner himself escaped Munich in April 1945, lived in West Germany under false identity, and died in Dusseldorf in 1982 without ever being prosecuted. His daughter's archival donation revealed the scope of his wartime activities, but too late for any legal consequences. The Swiss passport under the name Klaus Hoffmann had different origins. This was genuine documentation from a deceased aid worker named Klaus Hoffmann, born 1903 in Zurich, who died in Munich Hospital on January 17, 1945, from typhus. Hoffmann's body passed through the military morgue where it was supposed to be registered, and his personal effects sent to Swiss consulate. Instead, Klaus, who had contacts in the mortuary administration through his transport command position, arranged for the body to be registered under a false name, while keeping Hoffman's genuine identity documents. The real Klaus Hoffmann was buried in a mass grave as unknown male, approximately 40 years old. His passport ended up in Klaus von Reichenbach's hands. Klaus's route through the Alps followed paths he'd reconnoitered during official inspections in 1944. As transport command officer, he traveled extensively through the Alpine region, ostensibly checking railway facilities and supply depots. In reality, he was mapping escape routes. His journal contains hand-drawn maps showing the complete route. Waypoint 1, Berchtesgaden Railway Depot 47, 6,319 degrees N, 13, 0035 degrees E, April 24th evening. Retrieved gold changed to civilian clothes departed 19:00 hours. Waypoint 2, Mitterer Farmhouse near Ramsau 47, 5,893 degrees N, 12, 8,861 degrees E, arrived 23:45 hours April 24th. Overnight shelter departed 05:00 hours April 25th. Payment, 200 Reichsmarks cash. Waypoint 3, Forest crossing into Austria 47, 5,634 degrees N, 12, 9,127 degrees E, 09:30 hours April 25th. Unmanned border area, no checkpoints. Crossed without incident. Waypoint 4, Brenner Hunting Lodge near Altacy 47, 6,381 degrees N, 13, 7,692 degrees E, arrived 16:00 hours April 25th. Stayed 3 days. Payment, 2 gold bars. This is where Klaus met with lawyer Haupt's courier and received the Innsbruck contact information. Waypoint 5, Construction of Altacy Vault 47, 6,494 degrees N, 13, 7,814 degrees E, April 27-29. Hired miners built chamber stored containers. Payment, 2 gold bars to miners. Waypoint 6, Continuation southeast April 30th toward Swiss border. The journal describes a careful route avoiding main roads and Allied advance units. Klaus hiked approximately 70 kilometers over 3 days, staying in forest shelters or abandoned buildings. Waypoint 7, Austrian-Swiss border crossing near Feldkirch 47, 2,356 degrees N, 9, 6,014 degrees E, night of May 2-3. Klaus observed border patrols for 6 hours, timing their rotations. At 03:00 hours May 3rd, he crossed through a forested area between guard posts. Swiss territory achieved. Switzerland officially maintained neutrality, but interned refugees from both sides. Germans entering Switzerland were supposed to register with authorities and submit to internment in camps until their status could be determined. Klaus avoided registration. Instead, he used the Innsbruck contact information, the lawyer Haupt, to arrange private accommodation while Swiss transit papers were prepared. This cost him 6 gold bars, the largest single payment of his escape. Dr. Werner Haupt operated a sophisticated network. He maintained legitimate law offices in Innsbruck and Zurich, but supplemented his income substantially by helping wealthy Germans enter Switzerland without official registration. For the right price, Haupt could provide temporary accommodation, private homes where refugees stayed while documents were prepared, usually 2 to 4 weeks. Klaus stayed at a villa near Zurich owned by Haupt's associate. Document authentication. Haupt had contacts in Swiss bureaucracy who could create genuine Swiss transit papers and residence permits, just filed under false information. These weren't forgeries, but actual government documents fraudulently issued. Financial services. Conversion of gold or valuables into Swiss francs deposited in numbered accounts. Haupt arranged exchange through friendly jewelers and bankers who didn't report transactions. Onward connections. links to similar networks in Italy, Spain, and South America for those wanting to leave Europe entirely. Haupt charged according to client risk level. SS officers and known war criminals paid premium prices, 10 to 20 gold bars plus cash. Wehrmacht officers with no direct participation in atrocities paid moderate fees, 5 to 8 bars. Civilians and deserters paid lowest rates. Klaus, as Wehrmacht transport officer with no documented war crimes charges, paid 6 bars plus 1,000 Swiss francs cash. In exchange, by May 15, 1945, he possessed Swiss residence permit valid for 6 months under the name Heinrich Brenner, German railway engineer seeking asylum. Work authorization allowing employment in Switzerland, though Klaus never used this. Transit visa for Italy, facilitating onward travel when desired. Bank account at a Zurich bank containing 8,400 Swiss francs. His remaining gold bars converted to currency at favorable rates. Haupt's activities remained unknown to authorities until 1949, when a separate investigation into gold smuggling revealed some of his operations. By then, Haupt had helped an estimated 200 Germans disappear into Switzerland and beyond. He was convicted of fraud and currency violations, sentenced to 4 years imprisonment, and disbarred. After release in 1953, he moved to Brazil and died in Sao Paulo in 1967. Klaus spent 2 years in Switzerland, living quietly under the Heinrich Brenner identity. He rented a small apartment in a Zurich suburb, avoided German refugee communities, and waited for post-war chaos to settle. He knew leaving Switzerland too quickly might attract attention. Seeming legitimacy required patience. His journal from this period reflects a strange limbo existence. He had freedom but no purpose. He had money but no connections. He had survived but was profoundly alone. Entry from December 1945. I watch families celebrate Christmas. I have no family, I celebrate nothing. Survival is not living, but it is all I have. By 1947, Klaus decided to leave Switzerland. The country was small, German communities were under scrutiny, and he wanted greater distance from potential investigators. His target, Spain, where Franco's fascist government welcomed Germans regardless of their wartime activities. The route to Spain ran through Italy. Klaus contacted Haupt's associates. The network persisted even after the war and arranged transit through the monastery route, a path facilitated by sympathetic Catholic clergy. In May 1947, Klaus crossed from Switzerland into Italy at Como, using his legitimate Swiss transit papers. He traveled to Milan, then to a Franciscan monastery near Pavia. The monastery served as way station on one of several rat lines, helping Germans reach South America or Southern Europe. The monks, later investigated by Italian authorities, claimed they helped refugees on humanitarian grounds without investigating backgrounds. In reality, several monks were active Nazi sympathizers who deliberately aided escape of wanted criminals. But they also helped ordinary soldiers and civilians, maintaining plausible deniability. Klaus stayed at the monastery for 3 weeks in June 1947. During this time, the monks arranged his new identity, Claudio Richenbach. They provided Italian residence papers and facilitated connection to Spanish contacts in Barcelona. Payment: 2,000 Swiss francs to the monastery for charitable works. An additional 1,500 francs to a document forger in Milan who produced the Spanish entry papers. Klaus traveled from Milan to Genoa, then by train along the Italian Riviera to the French border at Ventimiglia. He crossed into France on July 23, 1947, using his Italian papers without incident. From Nice, he traveled by train through southern France to Port-Boo on the Spanish border. Spain under Franco actively recruited European immigrants, particularly skilled professionals, and anyone opposed to communism. German refugees were welcomed. especially those with technical expertise valuable for Spain's industrial development. Klaus entered Spain at Port Boo on September 14, 1947, presenting his papers as Swiss-naturalized German engineer Claudio Richenbach. Spanish immigration officials asked few questions. He was approved for residence the same day. He chose Barcelona deliberately, large enough to disappear into but not the capital where scrutiny might be greater. A port city with international connections, cosmopolitan atmosphere, and substantial foreign population, perfect for an invisible life. Using his remaining funds, approximately 4,000 Swiss francs, about $920 US dollars, Klaus rented the apartment on Cara de la Marina and began searching for employment. His railway expertise was genuine and valuable. Ferrocarrils de Catalunya hired him in October 1947 as logistics consultant. His work was identical to his Wehrmacht duties, optimizing freight routing, improving efficiency, coordinating supply chains. Just no war, no military ranks, no genocide support. The network that brought Klaus to Barcelona helped at least 47 other Germans reach Spain between 1945–1952, according to documents discovered in 2019 at the monastery near Pavia. Names include minor Nazi party officials, Wehrmacht officers, one Gestapo agent, and 32 ordinary soldiers or civilians. The monks maintained records in coded ledgers that weren't deciphered until recently. Most settled in Spain permanently, living under false identities until death. A few moved onward to South America. None were ever prosecuted. The rat lines worked. By the early 1960s, West Germany intensified war crimes prosecutions. The Eichmann trial in 1961 had galvanized international attention on Nazi fugitives. The Frankfurt Auschwitz trials beginning in 1963 expanded prosecutions beyond death camp personnel to anyone who'd facilitated Holocaust operations. Klaus, reading German newspapers available in Barcelona, recognized danger. His transport command role, especially his signature on documents authorizing supply shipments to concentration camps, could theoretically make him prosecutable. The statute of limitations on war crimes didn't exist. Evidence was being gathered. Witnesses were testifying. Even after 18 years of safety, Klaus felt vulnerable. He decided to relocate again, this time to Argentina, where German fugitives numbered in the thousands and government cooperation with prosecutors remained minimal. At age 55, Klaus liquidated his modest Spanish assets, savings, pension contributions, and booked passage to Buenos Aires. He entered Argentina as Claudio Richenbach, Swiss retiree seeking warmer climate for health reasons. Immigration officials asked nothing more. But tracking Klaus's Argentine life proves nearly impossible. Buenos Aires was enormous. German communities were insular and records were poorly maintained. He appears to have lived in the Belgrano district initially, then moved to smaller towns in Buenos Aires province. No employment records exist. He was retirement age. His Swiss bank account shows small periodic withdrawals until 1968, then nothing. Did he die in 1968, as the final journal entry suggests? Did he move again, perhaps to Paraguay or Brazil, where Nazi fugitives also concentrated? Did he assume yet another identity, leaving even the Claudio Richenbach name behind? The network that sustained Klaus from 1940–1963 likely supported him in Argentina as well. German mutual aid societies operated throughout South America, helping newcomers find housing, employment, and community. These networks asked no questions about the past, understanding that many members had things to hide. Klaus von Reichenbach ultimately vanished into the same historical fog that concealed thousands of Nazi-era Germans who escaped justice. He succeeded not through dramatic action, but through careful planning, systematic execution, and willingness to abandon his identity completely. The network revealed by his escape demonstrates how thoroughly the post-war rat lines functioned. Corrupt officials, sympathetic clergy, practical businessmen, and former comrades created an infrastructure that allowed systematic escape. Klaus exploited this infrastructure with the same efficiency he once applied to Wehrmacht logistics. December 1963, Buenos Aires, Argentina. A gray-haired man in his mid-50s rents a modest apartment in the Belgrano district, a middle-class neighborhood popular with European immigrants. He gives his name as Claudio Richenbach, retired Swiss engineer. He speaks fluent Spanish with Germanic accent, carries himself with military posture, keeps to himself. This is Klaus von Reichenbach at 56 years old, 18 years after his official death, beginning what would be his final chapter. But because Klaus left almost no documentary trail in Argentina, reconstructing this period requires inference, indirect evidence, and fragments. The Swiss bank account provides one data trail. Records show withdrawals from a Zurich account held under the name Claudio Richenbach. January 1963, 800 Swiss francs withdrawn, Buenos Aires branch. April 1963, 600 Swiss francs. July 1963, 750 Swiss francs. October 1963, 500 Swiss francs. January 1964, 400 Swiss francs. Monthly withdrawals continue through 1967, gradually decreasing in amount. Final withdrawal, March 1968, 150 Swiss francs. The declining amounts suggest either decreasing need for money, perhaps Klaus had found local income, or declining resources, his savings running out. By 1968, the account balance reached near zero. Argentine immigration records list Claudio Richenbach's entry in February 1963 but show no subsequent registration changes. He didn't apply for permanent residency. He didn't purchase property. He didn't register businesses. He existed in Argentina's informal economy, leaving minimal bureaucratic footprint. German community records in Buenos Aires provide tantalizing hints. The Asociación Cultural Argentina, Hermana, Argentine-German Cultural Association, maintained membership lists. A C. Richenbach appears as member from 1964-1967, address listed simply as Belgrano. No other details. He attended no recorded events, held no positions, participated in no activities. Just a name on a list paying annual dues. Why join if not participating? Perhaps for access to the community's informal networks, job referrals, housing connections, social services available to German immigrants. Or perhaps simply for a minimal connection to his cultural origins, a reminder that Claudio Richenbach was covering for Klaus von Reichenbach, and Klaus was German regardless of his current passport. Several documents in the Altacy vault suggest Klaus maintained contact with Switzerland, even from Argentina. A Swiss bank statement dated November 1965 shows account balance of 4,200 francs, separate from the account he was withdrawing from. Klaus apparently had multiple accounts under the Richenbach identity. More intriguingly, the vault contained 3 letters bearing Argentine postage, dated 1964, 1966, and 1968. These letters were addressed to Herr K. Hoffmann, Postfach 847, Zurich, a post office box in Zurich under Klaus's earlier Swiss false identity. But the letters themselves were found in the vault, meaning they were written, stamped, addressed, but never actually sent. Dr. Waldner believes Klaus wrote these letters as a psychological exercise, a way to document his Argentine life while maintaining absolute operational security. Actually sending letters created risk, postal records, handwriting samples, return addresses, but writing them satisfied some need to record his existence. Letter dated April 1964. Dear Herr Hoffmann, I write to report my continued good health in retirement. The climate here suits an old man better than Swiss cold. I have found modest consulting work with a shipping company, nothing strenuous enough to supplement my pension. The German community here is large but discreet. Many, I suspect, have histories they prefer not to discuss. We coexist peacefully in our mutual silence. Shipping company consulting work suggests Klaus was using his transportation expertise once more. Buenos Aires port handled enormous freight traffic. A logistics expert could find consulting work without official employment contracts, getting paid in cash, leaving no records. Letter dated August 1966. The news from Germany troubles me. They prosecute Wehrmacht officers now for simple obedience to orders. Lieutenant Schwarz received 15 years for authorizing supply shipments to concentration camps. His role was identical to mine. If Schwarz is criminal, then so am I, but Schwarz surrendered in 1945 and lived openly. I disappeared and am safe. Who chose more wisely? The answer is obvious but not comfortable. This letter reveals Klaus's awareness that his escape was not heroic but merely successful. He felt no pride in survival, only grim satisfaction at having avoided Schwarz's fate. The moral question haunted him, not whether what he'd done during the war was right. He seemed to have resolved that question years ago, but whether his escape itself constituted admission of guilt. Letter dated February 1968. I am 60 years old now, the same age my father reached before Dresden took him. I have lived longer than I probably deserved. My body fails in small ways. My hands shake, my vision blurs, my joints ache with the damp. I have no family to care for me in old age. I have no friends who know my real name. When I die, Claudio Reichenbach will be buried by acquaintances who never knew Klaus von Reichenbach existed. Perhaps that is appropriate. Klaus died in 1945. What walks around now is something else, a ghost wearing borrowed identity, sustained by stubbornness and fear of judgment. No death certificate exists for Claudio Reichenbach in Argentine records, but death certificates from that era, especially for elderly foreigners with informal residency status, were sometimes filed incompletely or lost entirely. Dr. Tomás Ruiz, searching Buenos Aires municipal death records, found 17 unidentified male bodies recovered between 1968-1970, approximate age range 55 to 70, no identification, buried in public cemetery as NN, Ninga Nomber, no name. Any of these could theoretically be Klaus. More likely, Klaus died in some remote location, a rural town, a boarding house, somewhere his body was discovered, identified only as Claudio Reichenbach if identified at all, and buried without ceremony or record. In 1960s Argentina, particularly outside major cities, such deaths often went unregistered. Alternatively, Klaus may have lived beyond 1968. The final journal entry might represent not his death, but simply his decision to stop documenting his life. Perhaps he destroyed later writings. Perhaps he moved to Paraguay, Chile, or southern Brazil, where German fugitive communities were even larger and less scrutinized. But the cessation of Swiss bank withdrawals in March 1968, the finality in his last journal entry, and the absence of any subsequent evidence all suggest Klaus von Reichenbach died sometime in 1968, probably in Argentina, probably alone, probably without anyone knowing his true identity. The vault contained 8 letters addressed to Margaret, written between 1940–51968. But Margaret died in 1945. Klaus knew this. He wrote the letters anyway. Dr. Elizabeth Waldner, who read all 8, describes them as psychologically complex documents showing a man simultaneously accepting and denying his wife's death, using letter writing as therapeutic processing of unresolvable guilt and grief. Some letters describe Klaus's daily life in Barcelona or Argentina. Others contain philosophical reflections on survival, morality, and meaning. Several express direct address. Margaret, if you could see me now. And I know you're not reading this, but I need to tell you. The most haunting letter dated Christmas 1957. 12 years since you died. 12 years I've lived without you. Hans would be 24 now, Gisela 22. I imagine them constantly. Hans studying engineering like me. Gisela perhaps married, giving me grandchildren, but these imaginations are torture. They died at 11 and 9. They never grew up. They never became adults. And I never saw their bodies, never attended funerals, never mourned properly. I just ran. I ran and kept running. Sometimes I think I should have stayed in Munich, died in the bombardment with honor. But I chose dishonor and life. Now I have both and neither. I am dishonored and alive and might as well be dead. The letters were never sent because they couldn't be sent. But Klaus added them to the vault during his periodic returns to Altacy, 1952, 1958, 1963. He made the dangerous journey from Spain to Austria and back, carrying letters to a dead woman, to deposit them in a sealed chamber where they might be found decades or centuries later. Why? Dr. Waldner theorizes. Klaus needed to believe his story would eventually be known. The vault was his confession, his testimony, his defense. He couldn't risk being caught alive, but he couldn't bear disappearing without trace either. The vault was compromise, total anonymity during life, possible discovery after death. The letters to Margaret were his way of maintaining relationship with the only people who'd truly known Klaus von Reichenbach. No verified sightings of Klaus exist after 1963. But in 2023, Dr. Ruiz interviewed elderly German-Argentine residents of Buenos Aires, asking if anyone remembered a man named Claudio Reichenbach. One witness, Fritz Mannheim, age 91, recalled, "There was a Reichenbach in the old days, very reserved man, Swiss I think, maybe German originally. Came to social club meetings sometimes in the mid-60s, never talked about his past. Someone said he'd worked on railways. He looked military though, way he stood, way he walked. Several men at the club had that look. We all knew not to ask questions." Mannheim last saw Reichenbach in 1967 or 1968. He looked sick, very thin, pale. I remember thinking he wouldn't last long. Then he stopped coming to meetings. I assumed he'd died. No one mentioned him again. That happened with older members. They'd stop showing up and we'd assume they'd passed. No funerals, no announcements, just absence. This testimony, while not definitive, aligns with Klaus's final journal entry in early 1968 and the cessation of bank account activity. Klaus von Reichenbach probably died in 1968 in Buenos Aires or surrounding area, age 61, under the false name Claudio Reichenbach, knowing no one would discover his true identity. Unless they found the vault. Which they did 55 years later, exactly as he might have hoped. The letters to Margaret weren't private, they were testimonial. The journal wasn't confession, it was historical record. Klaus von Reichenbach orchestrated his disappearance so thoroughly that even his death became uncertain. But he ensured that someday, someone would find the vault and know, Klaus lived. Klaus escaped. Klaus survived 23 years after official death, and Klaus never stopped being haunted by the family he lost and the identity he abandoned. The final mystery isn't how Klaus died, but why he cared about being remembered at all. A truly successful escape would leave no evidence, no vault, no journal. But Klaus couldn't accept that level of erasure. He had to leave something behind, some proof that Klaus von Reichenbach existed, loved, lost, survived, and disappeared. The vault was his gravestone. The documents were his epitaph. And the letters to Margaret were his only prayer for forgiveness from the one person whose opinion still mattered, even 23 years dead. The discovery of Klaus von Reichenbach's vault forces uncomfortable questions about justice, accountability, and the nature of guilt in total war. Was Klaus a war criminal? The legal answer remains ambiguous. He held no position in SS or Gestapo. He ran no concentration camps. He personally killed no one. His role was logistical, keeping supply trains running to military units and rear area facilities, including concentration camps. His signature authorized transport of materials, supplies, and yes, prisoners to camps including Dachau and Mauthausen. Under modern international law, such logistical support could potentially constitute complicity in war crimes. The Nuremberg Principles established that following orders doesn't excuse participation in crimes against humanity. The post-war Frankfurt trials prosecuted Wehrmacht officers for similar transportation roles. But Klaus was never charged, never tried, never convicted. He exists in the vast gray zone of perpetrators who facilitated the Holocaust machine without directly operating its killing mechanisms. There were tens of thousands like him: bureaucrats, accountants, railway schedulers, supply officers, who made genocide logistically possible. Is scheduling trains to Auschwitz equivalent to operating gas chambers? Morally, many argue yes. The system only functioned through coordinated participation of thousands who individually claimed clean hands. Legally, the answer has always been less clear. Dr. Heinrich Vogel, the Wehrmacht specialist who investigated Klaus's case, offers measured perspective. Klaus von Reichenbach represents the banality of evil that Hannah Arendt identified. He wasn't driven by sadistic hatred but by professional competence and personal survival. He solved logistical problems without examining what those solutions enabled. Or perhaps he examined and chose not to care. Either way, his efficiency made atrocity possible. That creates moral responsibility, even absent legal guilt. But Klaus's case is complicated by his personal tragedy. Dresden destroyed his family. The regime he served killed his wife, his children, his parents. He had every reason to hate Nazi Germany by war's end. Yet he continued serving until the collapse, then carefully escaped rather than surrender. Why? His journal suggests complicated motivation. I stayed until the end not from loyalty but from lack of alternatives. Desertion meant execution. Surrender meant prisoner camps, investigations, possible prosecution. I needed the right to collapse completely before I could escape cleanly. So I served faithfully until the machinery stopped, then I walked away from the wreckage. This reveals chilling pragmatism. Klaus assessed his options and concluded that continued service followed by planned escape offered better survival prospects than desertion or surrender. The morality of what he was serving became secondary to the strategic question of when and how to stop serving it. The concentration camp prisoners whose transport Klaus authorized never received justice for his role in their suffering. The slave laborers shipped through his logistics network never saw him prosecuted. The families destroyed by the system he helped operate never heard his name in war crimes trials. Klaus von Reichenbach died comfortably in South America, likely never facing legal accountability for any wartime action. From his perspective, this represented successful escape. From victims' perspectives, this represented failure of justice. Estimates suggest between 40,000 Nazi perpetrators, collaborators, and accomplices escaped prosecution by fleeing Germany in the immediate post-war period. Some were high-profile war criminals like Adolf Eichmann or Joseph Mengele, but the majority were mid-level functionaries like Klaus, guilty of facilitation rather than direct atrocity, valuable enough to deserve escape, but not prominent enough to attract intensive manhunts. These thousands lived out normal lives under false identities, dying peacefully decades after their victims died in agony. The arithmetic of justice simply didn't balance. Too many perpetrators, too few investigators, too much chaos, too little international cooperation in the early post-war years. By the time war crimes prosecution became systematic in the 1960s, most fugitives were deeply embedded in new identities, protected by sympathetic communities, and difficult to locate. Klaus's vault suggests he remained nervous about prosecution even in the 1960s, but that nervousness proved unnecessary. No one ever looked for him. No one knew to look. Klaus's methodical escape raises obvious question. How many others succeeded through similar planning? Historians estimate that organized rat lines, those run by Odessa, the Catholic Church, or other networks, helped 5,900 Germans escape to South America. But these were organized operations with clear documentation. Klaus's escape was essentially independent. He used existing networks but planned his own route, acquired his own resources, and executed his own disappearance. How many others did the same? No comprehensive answer exists. Tens of thousands of Wehrmacht officers and Nazi officials simply disappeared from Allied custody or never surrendered in the first place. Many died in the final chaos of 1945. Many were captured but never properly identified. Many escaped through individual planning. Post-war Germany contained approximately 18 million military veterans, several million Nazi party members, hundreds of thousands of SS and Gestapo personnel. The Allied occupation forces couldn't possibly investigate everyone. Denazification programs focused on senior officials and known war criminals. Mid-level functionaries often escaped scrutiny if they kept quiet about their pasts. Klaus's case suggests successful escape required three elements: advanced planning, financial resources, and absence of high-profile notoriety. Klaus had all three. He prepared months in advance, accumulated gold for funding, and wasn't famous enough to attract attention. Thousands of others probably succeeded through similar means. The discovery of occasional hidden documents, like Klaus's vault, suggests systematic escape was more common than generally acknowledged. The Klaus von Reichenbach case illuminates the fundamental problem with post-war justice. The guilty were too numerous, too dispersed, and too protected by post-war politics to be comprehensively held accountable. The Nuremberg trials prosecuted top leadership. Subsequent trials caught some concentration camp guards and senior officials. But the vast machinery of genocide operated through thousands of ordinary men, as historian Christopher Browning termed them, who weren't ideological fanatics but compliant professionals doing their jobs efficiently. Klaus epitomized this category. He wasn't Heinrich Himmler or Adolf Eichmann. He was a railway logistics expert who served whatever government employed him, prioritized his own survival, and arranged escape when collapse came. He felt no apparent ideological commitment to Nazism, but neither did he feel sufficient moral revulsion to refuse participation or accept punishment. The failure to prosecute Klaus and thousands like him represents either a pragmatic acknowledgement that justice for industrial-scale atrocity is impossible to administer comprehensively, or B, a profound failure of post-war accountability that allowed perpetrators to escape consequences. Both interpretations contain truth. The scale of Nazi crimes made comprehensive prosecution logistically impossible. But political considerations also limited prosecution efforts. The Cold War made Western allies prioritize German economic recovery over thorough denazification, and many former Nazis were strategically useful against communism. Klaus benefited from this historical moment. 10 years later, with mature war crimes investigation infrastructure, his escape might have failed. 10 years earlier, with no planning time, he might have been captured. He threaded perfect needle of timing, competence, and luck. Klaus von Reichenbach's escape plan demonstrated extraordinary organizational ability, systematic thinking, and operational security. From purely technical perspective, his disappearance was masterfully executed. He identified vulnerabilities in post-war chaos, assembled necessary resources, planned contingencies, and executed flawlessly. Can we admire the planning while condemning the purpose? Can we acknowledge his competence while recognizing it served avoiding accountability? This tension runs through all analysis of Klaus's case. His journal reveals intelligent, self-aware man capable of sophisticated moral reasoning. He wasn't stupid or blind to implications of his actions. He understood what he'd enabled during the war. He understood that escape meant avoiding judgment. He chose to escape anyway. That choice defines his moral character more than his wartime actions. During war, he followed orders in role he was conscripted into. After war, when choice became possible, he chose flight over accountability. He chose survival over justice. He chose to live free rather than face consequences. Perhaps understandable. Who wouldn't choose freedom over imprisonment? But understandability doesn't equal justification. Klaus had choice after the war in ways he claimed not to during it. His post-war choices reveal that his wartime service wasn't tragic necessity but acceptable pragmatism. The letters to Margaret show he felt guilt about surviving while his family died. He felt loneliness and regret, but he never expressed guilt about escaping justice, never wished he'd surrendered to face accountability. His guilt was personal, surviving when loved ones died, not moral, escaping punishment for enabling atrocity. This psychological profile suggests Klaus viewed himself as ordinary man caught in extraordinary circumstances who prioritized self-preservation throughout. The regime killed his family, yet he continued serving it until doing so became disadvantageous. Then he escaped and lived comfortably for decades. From his perspective, perhaps this made sense. From victims' perspectives, it represents banality of evil perfected. A man who helped murder millions not from hatred but from professional competence, then escaped to die peacefully in bed. The Klaus von Reichenbach case offers no simple moral lessons. He was neither monster nor hero, neither fanatic nor resistor. He was a competent professional who served a genocidal regime, lost everything personal to that regime's war, yet escaped accountability for his service because he planned better than those hunting him. His vault, discovered 78 years after his supposed death, forces us to confront uncomfortable reality. Many perpetrators escaped. Many lived well. Many died peacefully. Justice, comprehensive justice, was never achieved and never could be achieved given the scale of Nazi crimes and the chaos of post-war Europe. Klaus von Reichenbach succeeded in his escape. Whether that success represents his victory or history's failure remains the essential question his story poses. September 17, 2025, 2 years after the vault's discovery. The Sandling Massif stands unchanged, limestone peaks rising against Austrian sky exactly as they did when Klaus von Reichenbach sealed his secrets in 1945. But the vault itself has been transformed. The Austrian government, working with historical preservation organizations, has created the Altacy Documentation Center, a small museum built around the vault entrance. Visitors can now descend into the chamber where Klaus stored his escape documentation. The steel containers remain in place, displayed behind protective glass. The journal rests in climate-controlled case, open to significant entries rotated monthly. The maps, the photographs, the letters to Margaret, all preserved as historical evidence of one man's methodical disappearance. The museum exhibits don't glorify Klaus's escape. Instead, they contextualize it within the larger story of post-war rat lines, the failure of comprehensive denazification, and the thousands of perpetrators who avoided accountability. Klaus's story becomes representative rather than exceptional. Dr. Elizabeth Waldner, who discovered the first containers, serves as the museum's historical consultant. She gives periodic lectures examining the ethical complexities of Klaus's case. We must resist simplification, she tells visitors. Klaus von Reichenbach was not a monster, but neither was he innocent. He served a genocidal regime efficiently. He lost his family to that regime's war. He escaped judgment through competent planning. All of these things are true simultaneously. History is complicated. People are complicated. Justice is complicated. The museum has attracted unexpected visitors. In March 2024, Erika Schneider, Klaus's second cousin, the woman whose DNA confirmed his identity, traveled from Hamburg to Altacy. She stood in the vault for nearly an hour, reading the letters to Margaret, studying the man she'd never met but shared genetic heritage with. Afterward, she told reporters, "I feel strange connection to Klaus. We share ancestry but not memory. My grandmother was his mother's sister. They played together as children in Leipzig before the First War. Then history happened and Klaus became this man who disappeared. I don't know if I should be ashamed or sad or understanding. Probably all three." The museum displays Erika's photograph alongside Klaus's Wehrmacht ID picture. Same distinctive pale eyes, same angular facial structure. Genetics persisting across generations, connecting the disappeared to those who remain. More controversially, the museum has attracted visitors from the German expatriate communities in South America. Several elderly German Argentines have visited, walking slowly through the exhibits, studying the escape route maps with particular attention. Museum staff suspect some of these visitors might themselves be children of fugitives, or possibly fugitives themselves now too old and obscure to prosecute. One elderly visitor refusing to give his name was overheard saying to his companion, "My father did something similar. Austria to Italy to Spain to Argentina. He told me about it when I was 18, made me promise never to reveal his real name. He died in 1979. I've kept the promise 50 years. Seeing this makes me realize how many others did the same thing. We are a generation of children raised by ghosts." The vault has sparked renewed international effort to document unsolved disappearances from the Nazi era. The Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles now maintains a database of approximately 3,400 individuals known to have held positions in Nazi regime or military who disappeared after 1945 without confirmed death. Klaus von Reichenbach's name has been moved from presumed dead 1945 to confirmed survival until approximately 1968, died under false identity in Argentina. But 3,399 others remain unresolved. How many other vaults exist, sealed in mountains or buried in remote locations, containing the final testimonies of disappeared men? How many other Klaus von Reichenbachs lived out their lives under false names, leaving no trace except secrets hidden where perhaps someday someone might find them? The Alps hold thousands of caves, chambers, forgotten mines. The Andes stretch for thousands of kilometers with countless hiding places. The forests of Paraguay, the remote valleys of Bolivia, the vast pampas of Argentina, any could conceal documents, containers, evidence waiting for accidental discovery. Klaus's vault was found only because geologists happened to drill in precisely the right location while surveying for railway expansion. Without that coincidence, the chamber might have remained sealed for centuries. How many similar chambers exist, containing evidence of disappeared lives, waiting for drills or earthquakes or erosion to reveal them? In the museum's final room, a statement is displayed in German, English, and Spanish. It reads, "Klaus Heinrich Edler von Reichenbach served as Wehrmacht transport officer from 1930-919 for 5. He facilitated the logistical operations of a genocidal regime. He lost his wife, both children, and both parents to that regime's war. He faked his death, escaped through the Alps, and lived under false identities in Switzerland, Spain, and Argentina until his death approximately 1968. He was never prosecuted. He was never held accountable. He died peacefully while his victims died in agony. This represents a failure of justice that cannot be undone." This museum exists not to celebrate Klaus's escape, but to document it, to preserve evidence of how systematic disappearance functioned, how justice failed, and how history's darkest chapters produce consequences that echo for generations. Klaus von Reichenbach succeeded in disappearing, but he couldn't eliminate every trace. This vault proves that some secrets, however carefully hidden, eventually surface. The earth keeps secrets, but not forever. Standing in that museum, looking at the steel containers that held a dead man's secrets for 78 years, visitors confront difficult questions. Would you have done what Klaus did? Is survival itself a moral imperative that overrides accountability? When systems collapse, does individual responsibility dissolve into chaos? The vault offers no answers, only evidence. Klaus made his choices. History records the consequences. Justice, incomplete and imperfect, struggles forward. Outside, the Austrian Alps rise indifferent to human struggles below. Snow melts in spring, reforms in winter, following cycles older than nations or ideologies. The Sandling Massif stood before Klaus sealed his vault. It will stand long after his story fades from memory. But for now, the vault remains open, preserved, displayed, a testament to one man's methodical escape, a reminder that thousands escaped similarly, a question posed to every visitor: what would you have done? And what does your answer reveal about you? Sometimes the mountains keep secrets for 80 years. Sometimes those secrets, when finally revealed, tell us less about the past than about ourselves, about our capacity for both judgment and understanding, condemnation and empathy, moral clarity and uncomfortable complexity. Klaus von Reichenbach disappeared in 1945. In 2023, his vault was found. But the questions his story raises have no expiration date. The earth eventually reveals what we bury, but revelation alone isn't resolution. Klaus's story is now known. Whether knowledge equals justice remains history's unanswered question.